Peace and love, my creatives. Welcome to episode 2 of Paint With Me. Grab some paint, grab some markers, pencils, crayons, you name it. Grab it, get some paper, and let's go. Well, guys, another week has passed. Let me know in the comments how your week has been, okay? I'll let you know about mine. Uneventful. Not too much going on in the creative phenomenon household, which is a good thing. Right here, we're just sketching out our jester that I decided to sketch. I used that ruler to make a sketch line, and I say it in quotations because let me tell you, the ruler decided to move and it was crooked, but I worked it out. And here we have my little eraser picker-upper. Do we need it? No. Is it cute? Yes. Moving on. Okay, let's get our area ready. These swatches are for my St. Petersburg watercolors that I purchased from Jerry's Artorama. I like them. They're really nice, and a little goes a long way. Right now I'm wetting the paints with a little bit of water in a spray bottle. What that does is when I'm ready to actually paint, they've gotten a head start so that I can lift as much pigment as possible from the paint pans. Now I'm just getting my paint brushes ready. The ones that I think I'm going to use, the ones that I usually gravitate to, so I'm not looking for them later on. We got to get our water ready, right? Always two sides, one clean, one dirty. Never forget that. Unless you want a muddy paper. Now here I'm going to wet everything except for the jester, and I'm going to get it really, really saturated. The sheet that I have on the side of the paper, I'm going to use to swatch all the colors that I'm going to make. And I'm telling you, it's so helpful to have a swatch of the colors that you're going to put on your paper. It just makes life so much easier, so you're not guessing at the moment and then you put a color that just doesn't go as well as you thought it was going to go. Here I'm making a thumbnail of my drawing. It's gorgeous. The thumbnail. It's gorgeous. And the reason I'm doing that is so that once I do make the colors that I think are going to go good on the picture, I'm going to swatch it on that sheet, and I'm going to swatch it on the thumbnail too to see if it's the color that I really want to use. Now that blue is just so pretty that I had to do something with it. So that was like the first color that I picked to put on my palette. Such a pretty color. I'm going to move things over so that you can see the colors when they're going onto the palette. As far as colors are concerned, my initial thought for this particular painting was to go with a like purple, green, and dark. But then I saw that blue and I was like, yeah, I'm putting that there. So although it is the blue that I use, you'll see it transition. So just remember, always when you're making new colors, just remember more is better than less. You don't want to, in mid-painting, have to make that same color again, because sometimes it just doesn't match completely, and then your painting looks off. So you're not wasting paint. Put as much pigment on the palette as possible. Your palette can dry up, but you can reuse that paint. So just get it on there as much as you think you need, and don't be stingy. Now here I'm mixing that beautiful blue with the red that I took out, and it just makes this really, really pretty purple. But it's just not quite for this painting. It's not quite. So I finagle with it a little bit more. Now I want to introduce a green, but I really want it dark. I think this one is going to do it. So here I go, adding more colors, trying to get that green to match with the other colors that I have on my palette so far. But it's just still not exactly quite. So I switch over to a different shade of green, and I like that one better. But I just needed a little bit more darkness for this painting. So that dark color that I end up picking, the neutral tint black, is the perfect addition to the green, and it just makes it just perfect. It's the color that I was thinking about in my head. It just looks perfect. And when I mop it up a little bit, you see, yeah. You see the color that is just perfect. So once I realized that adding this neutral tint black to the green was exactly what I needed, I proceeded to add it to the purple color that I made and to the really, really pretty blue that I liked. But it's just that those colors were just too bright for the painting, and the muted tones are just exactly what the doctor ordered. So the difference in that pop of blue to the muted blue that the neutral black tint gives just made me so happy. So right here, I'm just trying to get an idea of what my painting is going to look like with the colors that I am thinking of putting on the outside border. And the technique that I'm going to be using is wet on wet. So that's how I do it on my swatch card on my thumbnail. And for the most part, I like it. I was thinking of introducing green to the mix, but I don't know, it just, something about it just wasn't what I was looking for. But I did have an idea already of what the paper was going to look like. So moving on to the painting, let's get started. So once I've cleaned off my swatching paintbrush, I moved to my Degado size 4 squirrel hair brush. This brush holds so much water that it is the perfect brush to saturate your paper. If you don't own one of these, consider it. It's definitely worth it. It wets the paper really well, and it really prepares it to accept the colors. Now you really want to exaggerate with the water. You do not want a little bit of water on your paper. You want it heavily saturated so that when you introduce those colors onto the page, your paper is super like ready to take those colors on. I feel like I said that already, like I'm repeating myself. My reason for this sketch was just, you know, inspiration strikes in the most random of places sometimes. I was watching a tabletop miniature build on one of the channels that I watch called Tabletop Time, and the sponsor for that particular show was a miniature company, and they put up a picture of the cutest little jester I've ever seen, but it was so sad looking because there was no color. And I'm like, I have to try to sketch this, and if the sketching is good, I will try to paint it. I'll put a picture on the screen. Isn't that adorable? So once I took that screenshot, I was like, yes, I have to do this. I sketched it a couple of days ago. I lined it yesterday, and today is the day to paint it. Okay, I'm gonna come back with this guy here. And I'm going to take my blue, that muted blue that I made, and I'm just gonna just all over. Right? Now stay with me. If it does what I want it to do, then the end result is going to be magnificent. But we shall see. So, yeah. What I've learned from watercolor is, especially this style here that I'm doing, the blooms, just own it, let it do what it do. Trust me, trust the process. It's gonna good. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. Now, the only thing with this is drying time. You don't want to rush it. You want it to do what it do. And yeah, I think I don't know if I want to introduce the green. I'm like torn. If I do the green, or if I don't. To green or not to green? That is the question. Look at those colors though. Oh my goodness gracious. Alright, so I'm going to let gonna let that just dry, and we'll come back to it. Okay, make sure I got all the corners. I don't mind a little bit of that little halo that's going around, but I don't want a lot of it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna leave that. And we're gonna come back when it dries. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm getting ready to see if I in fact should make her pants purple. Now, it looked nice. I knew where I was headed with it, but I don't know. It just, that green was like, listen, you made me, use me. So I decided to put the green on there, and I just like, I'm like, I gotta see this, how it looks like completely. So I proceeded to make a new beautiful jester with the paint down there, as you can see. And I liked the way those colors looked better with the green on the bottom and the purple on top. And I think that that was the way to go. So once I decided that I liked the way that looked, I put my swatch down and I moved on to painting. I ended up going a little bit darker with the green than I started with. So I took some of that green and added some of that Nutrits black tint and made a darker color. Now here I'm using that neutral black tint to color her boots, and I bring it to the front and I end up putting it on so dark. I'm like, that's too dark. I should have dabbed my paintbrush before I went in, but I kind of mop it up a little bit and I end up fixing it. But yeah, I did not like how dark I went in initially, because usually like when you're painting with watercolor, you want to start off with a light color and then work your way up to the darker color that you want. A lot of times I found myself scared to overlap or lay over a new color or the existing color just on top of the dry paint, But that's all you really have to do. If you let your watercolor dry, it makes all the difference when you're introducing more paint onto that same watercolor painting, if that makes sense. You know, like here I'm putting that design on her pants, and initially I was worried, because usually when I do an overlapping of my paint, it does not end well. But because I let it dry before I went back onto her pants, I was able to get these sharp differences in color, and also it did not bleed into what was already there, which is usually the case when you don't let it dry enough. You just end up having a mess of color on top of each other, and you don't want that. All right, I'm gonna focus, I think, on her jacket. Okay, so here we go again with this color. Oh my gosh, I really am like poorly gauging just how really dark this color is, and by no means did I mean to start this dark. I lighten it up, but I'm just like, again, you just did that with the boots. What are you doing? That's the plus with watercolor. If you go in quick enough, you can lift most of it, and sometimes you can lift all of the color back up depending on your paper. So thank goodness I was able to lighten it up a little bit, because shading would have been a disaster had I left it the darkness that it was. So here I decided, well, I decided like before I even started painting, I knew her face was not going to be like flesh tone. It was going to have some kind of other tone to it. And in my thumbnail, I thought I was going to make her hat, her jester cap, a purple, but instead I decided to go with doing her face that purple. I don't know, it just felt right. And here I'm adding her gloves to the mix. So her face and her gloves are both going to be purple. The gloves are going to be darker than what her face is going to be. And I think it's sold. I think it came out really good. I like it. Mistakes were made. Mistakes were made. I initially did not like what I was doing with her arm situation. I'm like, this is not working. I don't like it. Let me add some black to it. That wasn't working. So I ended up just like just swabbing it a little bit, like picking up some of the color and just walking away. Sometimes you just gotta walk away from a part on a painting and just revisit it, because it's just not that, it's not that part's moment. It's not that part's moment. Just move on. You didn't mess it up. Just move on and go to a different area. So that's what I did. I think that this was like the best choice that I made for her hat. I just love this green and how it looks on her head. I just love it. It's perfect. It is perfect. I can't say anything else about it besides that. It's like, I like it. I like it. Now here I kind of went a little too quick, I guess, as far as letting a section dry before I start adding wet around another section. I ended up having some paint bleed into her face. I had some green paint bleed into her face. Now, if ever that happens, just blot it. Get a piece of paper towel, blot it, and let it dry completely before you revisit that area. So I let it dry, and I'm seeing if, you know, I can go in without it leaking into the purple, her purple face again. And I decided no. So now here I'm just doing some shading. Again, using that same technique that I was talking about earlier with the color on top of color. You really just have to let the paint dry completely. And shading is a game changer when you're doing art. And it's also a game changer in my personal experience with art, because I just started being a little bit more bold as far as shading was concerned. I wasn't great at it, let's just put it like that, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Slowly but surely, I'm introducing where I want the values and all that, so I will get there.
I'm going to put a little bit more shadow here.
So here I'm checking to see if her face is finally dry, so I can go back in with the green on her hat. And it is. Huzzah! Now I feel like I had a little bit too much paint on my paintbrush, so what I did was I dabbed a little bit on my paper towel and I continued to paint her hat. So I wanted her hat to be a lot darker than it was, so once the initial paint dried for the first layer, I went on over again on her hat with another layer of that same color green. And for her face, I definitely wanted her eyes to be like just black, just empty soul, darkness, black. And I think that I portrayed that pretty well in her face. Like, I know she's smiling, but it's just something about it that I don't think she's smiling to say, hey, how are you? How are you doing? She's not. It's more like, I'm gonna get ya. And I'm gonna enjoy doing it. I really, really like this character. I think she came out so cute. And scary. Yeah, because you put cute and scary in the same sentence. It makes sense. It makes sense to me. So here I'm just shading her face with a slightly darker purple than what I actually painted her face. And I think it looks good. I think I put the shading in the right places. Again, I'm just learning how to do this shading stuff, so I don't know. It might need work, but I like the way it came out. Now I'm finally gaining my confidence back from her arm situation. And what I ended up doing was just keeping it that green. I did not paint it again. I just ended up just going over it, and the same pattern that's on her pants, I put on her sleeve. And it worked. I like the way it came out. Now, the way she's holding the weapon that she has in her right hand is the way that she was holding her weapon in the picture. So initially I'm thinking that I drew it wrong, but then when I went back to the picture, that's how she's holding it. So what I did was I made some kind of covering for where her hand goes, so that it's not just holding, I don't know, the scepter bare. Like there's like actual cloth there lining it. I do not know what that is, but like I said, I saw her, thought she was cute. That's what I do. So here I'm coming in with the Liquitex acrylic ink in the color iridescent. Wait, it's not iridescent. Wait. Yeah, iridescent bright gold. That's the color. And I, from the get, knew that I was going to color her crown gold, but I kind of wanted silver highlights for everything else. And there was every part of my body and soul saying, Elisa, no. Just paint everything else gold. The gold and silver is not, it's not going to go over the way you think it's going to go. And boy, was I happy that I did. I let it go. I filled my palette with a little bit more of that iridescent gold, and I went to town. I did the bottom of one of her scepters with the little bally on it. I did that gold. I did the little bells on her hat gold, and I even introduced the gold to her boots / stockings. I'm not sure. I'm gonna say stockings. I think those are stockings. Boots / stockings. How about that? And I like it. It was like a nice little accent and not too heavy. And I think it works. So I liked it so much. I ended up bringing it to the top of her hat as well. And oh boy, like it changed her hat to like, okay, now I'm done. You know what I mean? I love the way it came out. I love the way her hat came. It's my favorite part of the painting. Her face and the hat. Definitely my favorite part of the painting. I'm just shading her arm now. Putting a little shadow where I would think that the shadow would fall. Okay, the battle with her neck piece was, it was the truth. It was real. The battle was real and difficult. I did not know what I wanted to do as far as color was concerned. I know I didn't want to ruin it by putting too much color. I know jesters are colorful and you probably wouldn't go wrong with color, but because of the way it's shaped, I felt like if I added too much color, you would lose the shape of it in the color. So what I decided to do was darken the folds on top and on the bottom, and then just go in with a little bit of shading with that black on all of it. I actually did shading on her neck piece. I did shading on her wrist pieces, and I also did the same kind of shading on her scepters. So I went in with a little bit of pencil just to sharpen up the lines a little bit that needed sharpening. I eventually move on to a Tombow liner. I just felt that the pencil lining wasn't thick enough, and I wanted a little bit thicker of a lining. So yeah, I move on to the liner eventually. Here I'm just coloring in all the areas that did not get that kiss of color. And I'm just using the colors that are in the painting already. And I think I pulled it off because I didn't like the way it looked with the white surrounding. And I didn't want to, that was my initial thought, oh, let me just make the white line even bolder and just put a white outline on her. But I just felt like it was going to take away from the darkness of the painting. And I wanted it to be dark. I didn't want it to be bright. So I ended up going in with the pencil and then going on top of it with watercolor. And I think for the most part it blends in enough where you can't see too much white. There were areas where I definitely did like the white, like right underneath her hat on the left hand side. I don't know, it's beautiful. I like the way that came out. I'm really happy with this painting. I don't know if you can tell. I'm really happy with this painting. I tell you, when you are inspired to pick up a piece of a paper and pencil or pen or marker, just do it. Just do it. Take the moment and do it. Because you end up not only having fun, but you end up with a piece that you were inspired to do. And sometimes you're so inspired to do it, you draw it, and you're scared to paint it. That happens to me. But don't be scared. Paint it. And if it comes out bad, before you start painting it, make a copy. If you mess up, you can always make a copy. And then do it again.